These guys are ridiculous. These guys are ridiculous.
Now, how about them damn Celtics?
And we are back with another episode of How About Them Celtics. Sam and I are here recording on Thursday, December 1st, and we are joined by Bobby Manning of CLNS Media and CelticsBlog and the Dome Theory podcast. I had to throw that in there. How you doing today, Bobby?
Just got off the air over there. Talked a little Heat, this mini series with Wes Goldberg. So I love these. I love the fact that they play one game. There's a little bit of tension there at the end. It was a really good game, obviously, too. And then Bam gets ejected, and the Heat sounded pissed after the game. So Jimmy's back Friday. These two teams have played a lot of good games over the last 3 years here, obviously. So I'm sure Friday's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's always tough nights when the Heat come to town. But before we get into the Celtics, I did want to ask you, obviously, how was your Thanksgiving? I'll start with that.
Great. That's probably my favorite holiday, just because I'm a big food guy, and man, there's so much good stuff going on. I've done my mac and cheese 3 years running, and there was so much other stuff that like it didn't even get touched. So I still have pretty much all of it downstairs to hold me over. I froze it and gonna heat it up and have it over the next couple of weeks here.
There you go. That's the best part. I only ask you because we talked about this on our last episode, and Sam is our resident Grinch. And so I was about to ask you what you prefer, Thanksgiving or Christmas, but you kind of answered there. But Sam hates Christmas as a spoiler alert.
Except I'm more of like a universal Grinch. I just like hate everything. Like when you guys are talking about like the double back-to-back against Miami, I'm like, I really have to watch this team again on Friday. Like I can't stand these guys. I can't stand Strus.
Hey, it could be the Hornets.
I hated that he was not missing. I can't stand Bam and his illegal screens. I hate Lowry. He's a rat. I mean, like, it just goes on and on. Like Hero, he's a pain in the ass. Like, I'm so miserable with all the things, even though like they won.
Would you rather watch that or the Hornets coming in with like Kai Jones and PJ Washington?
Oh, if you're gonna win by 40 like you did on Monday, give me 2 games of that.
All right.
I'm at the point with the Celtics where I'm actually like mad if they're not blowing out the other team. Like, I think they're so like they feel like they're so good right now where it's like, why are you not blowing this team out? Like yesterday, like Miami kept hanging around thanks to like Strus threes or whatever. Like Lowry had a stretch where he was being an irritant and they were turning them over with the zone. And I was like, pull away from this team, man. Like you're so much better than they are. And it's just not happening. It was the first time in forever that they haven't blown out a team, even though they ended up winning by double digits. If I remember correctly, right? They did win by double digits, right?
Yeah, by 13.
Yeah. No, it was a good win. I mean, yeah, like I said, spoiled the question. I assume you prefer Thanksgiving over Christmas. That was my intro.
It's tight, though. You know, there's a lot of things I like about Christmas. The basketball slate's awesome. It's sort of like a week holiday right in the New Year's, which is cool. Thanksgiving comes and goes fast. But, man, that food of Thanksgiving, it's special. I've always been a big turkey guy. Potatoes are a big favorite of mine, and stuffing's a special thing you only eat once a year. So like that's always really exciting to me. And you know, pie's really grown on me over time too. Like I never used to be a big pie guy, and now I'm all about it. Apple, pumpkin, not blueberry, but you know, I'll pick at the crust.
Yeah, I got you. I like I'm a pecan pie guy. That and pumpkin are my 2 go-tos.
I don't think I've tried pecan pie ever.
It's really good. It's very like a lot of sugar. It's like a sweet tooth thing. But I love it. I love it.
I've never had it.
Very good. It's
I was telling Jack the
sugar
best
and
dessert I've ever had in terms of like homemade was at this Friendsgiving I had. It was these peanut butter balls that were like Reese's but crunchy. It was fantastic. I had like 4 of them right in a row. Not good for the sickness, but.
Speaking of desserts, Jack now is a regular at TD Garden. Nice to see him there now, and
that was on my list. I said I was going to say, oh man, this is the wrong page. I said, how is Jack at the games media? Is he big time in people now? He was saying big time Brad Stevens the other day.
No, that's not what I said. That I said I passed Brad Stevens in the hallway. I said hello, and before I realized who it was, because he just looks like another normal person, I was like, wait a second, and. Yeah. Anyways.
So back to the desserts. The brownies there, you don't see them often, but those are as good of a brownie as you'll have if you get the chance. I haven't seen it recently, but when they circle back around and they bring those out, you got to make sure you grab a few of those. They're like mini ones, so you got to grab like 4 or 5 of them.
All right, noted. I've been eating the cookies. Every time I leave and go up to the 9th floor, I grab a cookie and eat it up there. But
you gotta give them credit. They have amazing food at the Garden.
They do.
Media.
It's very good. The roast beef they had the other day, the brisket, it was indulged. I'll say that. But we have plenty of Celtics talk to talk about. Speaking of, you got the jersey in the back. Let's just start there. Celtics today, as we're recording this, extended Al Horford 2 years, $20 million. Bobby, we know you're a huge Al Horford guy. I mean, just initial reactions, I guess, to the contract extension.
I was a little surprised. I actually saw his agent at the game last night, so I guess it's not a huge surprise that he was here getting that done. And not surprising to see the Celtics get it done at that number. That's probably less than he would have earned if he kept rolling at this rate.
Yeah.
48% from three, still one of the most versatile defenders in the league. And that was sort of in the back of my mind to start this year, is the fact that, like, we had all talked about Grant and his extension, but Horford entering unrestricted free agency in a market where there was a lot of money was going to be tricky for them if he actually took a long look at leaving, or at least pushed them to get another big contract. But this time around, 4 years later, actually gave them a little bit of a hometown deal, it looks like here. He gets the second year, which is probably the sweetener for him in there. 38 years old, 17 years into his career at that point. He'll make a little bit over $10 million at that point. So I think it's fair for both sides here. It's great to not have that worry this offseason. It probably actually gives them a little bit more leverage against Grant, the fact that they will have Horford here if they really do have to make the tough decision to let him go and say he gets $20 million or something north of that. Also, great, you look at their books and all that, to see it go from $26.5 million to $9.6 million. That's a big difference, and you can almost use the difference there to pay Grant that 16, 17 million that would probably be the compromise point between the two different prices that we've seen thrown out there around Grant's value. So, you might have Grant and Horford next year for less combined, or at least the same as they were both making last year.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's so funny. You were the first person I thought of today when I saw the news. I was like, Bobby's a big Horford guy. He's got the Horford jersey in the background, and we're going to have him on today. This is the most perfect news to break this morning. And it's funny because when the trade happened over the summer last year, we had you on right before that or right after, and we were both pumped about it. We were both calling for Horford to come back to the Celtics before it actually happened. Jack, I always will bring it up to him. Like, I was telling you, I was like, he'd be a perfect fit. I wish he never left. He would have been perfect. It's great that they secured him for so little money. Taking a pay cut to stay is something I thought would happen the first time he was here. It did not, but I was right the second time. So it's definitely something to be happy about. And he's still playing at such a high level.
I was just about to say, I don't think he's getting enough credit for the start. He's starting at center, playing more minutes than last year. There's certain nights where the backups don't even get a minute, and he's just out there pretty much the whole game. Playing even better than last year, feels like. Of course, from three, he's just been unbelievable. But passing, the outlet passes and all the different high post reads that he makes, those are as crucial to the offense as anything else they do. And he's obviously one of their better screeners as well in this offense that screens a ton. And he's had to pick up the slack here going back to, March? For Rob's injury, because Rob really hasn't been right or available, period, since that injury in late March. So he's had to double his efforts. He stayed consistent. He came back in even better shape than last year, it looked like. I remember just how he looked at camp. It was tremendous. And he's going to continue to be a mainstay here. And this is, obviously me being the fan of him that I am. For him to probably retire a Celtic, which is what this deal probably sets up here, it's going to be really special because he is going to go down as one of the guys, and especially if they win a championship here over the next couple of years, who really changed things after the couple of years there where they were in the middle of the league or even the bottom of the league after the KG years. Almost got them Durant that after he arrived there, got them a bunch of other stars, whether Hayward or whoever else ended up coming through here, helped develop Rob, Tatum, Brown, and all these young guys that are obviously the stars of the roster now. He's going to have a really special place in Celtics history. And, if they win a championship, you might think about putting 42 up there. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, I think he's going to have a couple more really good years here. But there's a lot of guys, obviously, you'll think about if they win a championship here. Of course, you think Zero is going to go up there eventually if he plays his whole career here.
For
36.
sure. 36. That's the other contentious one, I guess you could argue, but
Contentious.
I'm
If
just
they
saying
win a
it's the
title with
argument.
Smart, that's easy money. He's
Again,
the
we're all
longest
gonna
guy.
if they win a championship, we're all gonna be like 42, 36,
Yeah.
0. So like it'll be every number. There'll be 40 will be up there for Luke Kornet.
Yeah, right. No, but Al Horford, like you mentioned, career high 4.4 threes a night. He's shooting right now 48.8%, which you have to imagine probably isn't that sustainable throughout the season. But if you can keep it above 40, that's still close to a career high for him. Last time he shot that well, he was an all-star in Boston, shooting 43% from three. Playing a phenomenal season. I do want to ask you though, you mentioned the Grant thing. Do you think part of the reason why the Celtics didn't sign Grant to a number he wanted because they were not sure if Horford would take this discount? Like, do you think they were waiting to see, okay, let's see what Horford agrees to, and then we can agree to pay Grant because they didn't want to get over a certain amount, like in that aspect?
It's a tough question because I wasn't really, I'd been tuned a little bit on the Grant negotiations and what was going on there. I really didn't hear anything about Horford negotiations. So that's why it kind of took me as so much of a surprise that they got that done. Maybe it had something to do with how hot he started and them just want to get ahead on that. Maybe they want to see what he looked like into this season and then go from there. I'm sure it's a little bit of all those things there. And then you have to loop in the Grant situation as well. Maybe the fact that they didn't get something done with Grant increased the urgency a little bit to lock Horford up there and not potentially lose two guys. I mean, they couldn't lose both of them, especially with Rob's health.
Yeah.
Like they just would have been so thin. Even losing one of them is going to be tricky there. And I love Luke, but the fact that they have like four guys in rotation there eventually is what's really going to make them strong in the front court. So I don't really know what like connectedness there is between the Grant and the Horford negotiations. I just know that they were pretty far apart on Grant in terms of those numbers, and we'll see how that reconciles himself. Like I think Grant was right to have that really high number for himself. I remember seeing 20 the first time in that Fisher report and being like, wow. But you start to look around the league at who's getting what and what those numbers are eventually going to be. And you understand him looking at that cap spike and saying, all right, I want to be in line with some of the even bigger contracts that are going to be signed then. Because if he signed for like 10 or 11 or whatever, that'd be pennies once the cap spikes, like just a tiny percent. And that doesn't change under a new cap. It's all based on the first year. So for guys like him who are going to sign and then see the cap increase later in their contract, you understand them having like a really high expectation right now. And does he hold that into the offseason? We'll see. He's obviously having a tremendous year so far, although he's been a little quieter in November, I've noticed. So we'll see what happens with his season. He's great. I think they both were smart for taking the positions that they did. The high number for Grant and the lower number for the Celtics there. And I think there's a possibility that they could settle in the middle, but you do risk the team really coming over the top if he has a huge year and investing huge money in him. At that point, I think I was looking this morning. If he gets $20 million a year, that's $35 million in tax alone next year before you sign three more guys to round out the roster. So it does get steep at that point. I think they're paying 45 this year, so it's probably equal just because of that great Horford decrease you're getting right now. That's another reason this deal is so key for Horford here. But it does. I think it's got some relation to the Grant. It's hard to separate those two.
Grant's certainly working for that money. He's been balling out too. Dove on the floor yesterday.
That was a big play.
Some offense. I mean, he's been balling out. He's been shooting well. He's learning to drive off the closeouts now and become more of just a stationary shooter in the corner. And he's still playing defense. He definitely could get paid by one of those lesser teams. That's what bad teams do. They throw money around.
I think of Charlotte. I think of Charlotte. I think of Detroit. I think there's money out there for him this summer. Like I really do. So it's going to be a challenging question for the Celtics with him because I think he's so important. I think he's great in the room. I think he's super versatile, and he's sort of part of your succession plan after Horford, right? Like you hope that at some point those guys kind of hand the torch to each other and Grant's your power forward alongside Rob once Horford kind of takes that step back closer to 40. So losing that, it obviously took them years to develop Grant into what he is now. It's not easy to develop bigs. It doesn't happen fast. So you might just have to eat that money and have a really expensive roster that's contending for championships. The hard part is that you have Brown and Tatum extensions coming up. And obviously, like you look at Tatum and what he's doing right now, he's all NBA for like the next however many years. So he's getting $300 million in 2024. And then Brown, he's been a little up and down, but the scoring numbers make you think he can at least challenge for all NBA over the next 2 years. So that's $300 million right there as well. And you do have to factor that in alongside those late end years of what Grant's contract would be. And those are obviously usually the higher numbers on a contract. So you're looking at like Warriors, Nets type luxury tax bills at that point. And, you know, every team has a line, and that's how you end up kind of losing. The Warriors just lost Porter, Payton, and, you know, they might lose Green here. So everybody loses guys.
Yeah.
And for the Celtics, it might be Grant.
Yeah, I mean, preaching to the choir here, I'm a bit biased in the Grant talks, but I think the Celtics should have brought him back.
If they don't pay him, that money goes away, right? They have flexibility just for their own guys.
Yeah, and they don't have picks, so it gets tougher to replace them. But, you know, is Hauser part of that? Do they find other guys? Like, you're not going to find Grant. Like, you're not going to find another Grant. You just sort of have to make it work. Like, that's why the luxury tax is there, for balance and helping other teams get guys like that and making sure you don't have like a Warriors situation. So it's going to be tough. And this is just sort of what happens with great teams. Great, you know, everybody sort of gets their success, and, you know, they earn their contracts. And I think, again, he's right to be asking for the big money. He's been making what, $3-4 million here the last couple of years, and this is his chance for that improvement that he made to get his payday. So we'll see what happens there. At least they have him for this year.
Yeah, and I think that's the benefit of having. I mean, you look at like the big players on the roster, Smart, White, Brogdon, all under contract for a little while here, so you can afford to pay the big luxury tax for a couple seasons, and then I guess you'll have to figure out where to go from there, because by this time Smart, White, and Brogdon are at the end of their deals, they'll be what, around 32, 31-ish, like entering their early 30s. Maybe they take a discount like Horford, but at that point you're still looking at probably another contract of full money. So it gets hard, and then like you're talking about, like, you have to make choices, and like the Warriors had to make choices with Kevon Looney, Gary Payton. Celtics might have to make similar choices when it comes down to the Smart, White, Brogdon trio. And then even before that, like deciding who you want to pay up to that point.
Brown,
Hopefully,
I mean,
yeah, Brown too. You can't forget.
Brown's the big one, because listen, you're gonna pay $1 billion for Tatum if they needed to. They're putting themselves in a position right now where they have to pay Brown Tatum money, and I think they'll do it. Like, you know, like the choice isn't like, you know, stay or leave, but they'll be deciding next summer whether they offer him that supermax potentially, because you don't know until the year after whether it becomes a supermax or just the normal max. And Brown will be asking for the supermax, and they'll have to give it to him to get an extension done at that point. And you'll be thrilled if you can get that extension done and have Brown and Tatum locked up together at that point. But then you have Tatum and Brown making like those Rudy, Westbrook, whatever, you know, whoever else was on the supermax deal equivalents. And, you know, what's that going to be under the new cap? 60 million, 70. It's going to be insane what those guys are making.
Those contracts I just love.
Sam hates those. Yeah,
it's hard to imagine what these numbers are going to look like under this new cap coming up. So that's where, you know, Grant shaves a little bit off the bottom end of that, and, you know, he might be the guy who you have to let go to keep Brown here long term. And those are the kind of tough decisions you have to make if you're going to keep this team together.
Yeah, it's brutal. Sam and I had like we do a pregame show before the games, and we talked for like 10 out of our 30 minutes about Bam Adebayo's contract, because obviously the Heat's contract books are their own problems, I guess. You got Lowry with 30 mil, Duncan Robinson with 19, Jimmy Butler going to be making 50 in a couple years. And we talked about Adebayo. And Sam, what was your argument? You effectively like, what was
I believe that started because I made a comment about he makes the same money as Tatum, and like, look what Tatum's doing. Yeah. And Jack's point of view, which is I think we both had points that were right, was, I mean, not every guy that makes that money is going to be equal. Like, they can still be good and worth the money in different degrees. And I'm such like a cash grab guy where I'm like, oh man, like, you can't pay that guy that much money. You're not gonna be able to pay anybody to like lead your team.
And that's the thing with Grant. Like, if they paid Grant $18 million in the extension or whatever, would have gotten it done. I think the report that was out there was that like 16 might have got it done or something like that.
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're looking at Grant, and it's a different level of expectation, right? And Horford sort of went through this when he got the big money here to bring it back to him. Remember, it was like 10 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, and everyone would be like, "This is what 30 million gets you." Like that first time
That was
around.
the big narrative with Horford.
People, yeah, people didn't appreciate him as much, and that's sort of what Grant is going to be on this new deal. Like, what does Grant get this year? He's averaging like what 10 and 4, and maybe an assist or two. Obviously, like there's little intricacies. We know like the value he brings in terms of how he can guard every position, and like he's a lot like Al. He really is. Then all of a sudden at 20 million, that becomes a little harder to appreciate than at the rookie deal. So that's something fans are gonna have to go through at that point too. But to your Bam point, Sam, the Celtics got really lucky here when we start to look at this money situation, because if you remember, he signed that like designated player extension, and he didn't get the All NBA that year. I forget what year that was.
Oh, Tatum, yeah.
So they would have been hitting the tax last year, and then they would have been hitting the repeater tax a year earlier. So all this stuff would have been sped up a little bit at that point if they didn't get that break with him. We'll see if they get that break with Brown here, but I haven't really stacked up the All-NBA race. It's obviously not decided by this year, but this is sort of that preview year with Brown, right? Where we're like, all right, is he capable of getting All-NBA and reaching that status? Because obviously if he gets it this year, that probably makes it a little bit easier for him to get it in the future.
No, yeah, absolutely.
They've both been like nuclear to start the season. Brown's a little bit sloppier than Tatum, but man, like they both just go out and get 30 a night like it's nothing.
Who are your forwards? Like, this is a whole segment, I'm sure.
For All-Star or All-NBA?
All-NBA. It's okay. Like it's Durant, Tatum,
Giannis.
Giannis is sort of that big forward mix. I don't really know how
that's the problem with this too. Is like who plays what position now? Like, is Luka a forward? Is he a guard? Like, is Jimmy Butler a forward?
What's Brown?
Or is he a guard? Is
Brown a forward or a guard?
It's a good question too. Yeah, I guess you
because like
Anthony Davis.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Like if you take injuries into account, it's even harder because like Embiid's going to come back eventually. You got Siakam who's going to come off his injury eventually, and he was ridiculous to start the season before he got hurt. Like you said, Bobby, Durant's there. Tatum, obviously, Giannis. You got a lot of forwards there, and then if Brown
can make a third team, he can.
Brown, yeah. Well, is he a guard or a forward though? That's the question. Because like that's where it gets tough. Because then
if I had to choose, I'd say forward. I feel like he plays forward more than guard.
I agree, but isn't that what happened to Tatum? Like half the voters voted for him as a guard, and so the votes got like all wonky. And like Kyrie made it an All-NBA team that year with less votes than Tatum, but Tatum was a forward because some people voted like they just need to make it 15 players and get rid of the like. Everyone talks about positionless all the time, except we still do positions for all the things that matters. Like I saw you tweet about Marcus Smart potentially making the All-Star team, but like only 6 guards can make the All-Star team because at least X amount can, 2 have to be in the starting lineup, 2 on the bench, and then there's only 2 reserves. And then you have like the 2 guards on the Hawks, the 2 on the Cavs, at least Brunson's in the mix, Tyrese Halliburton, Drew Holiday, like it's ridiculous, the field, how much talent there is in the league nowadays. And the fact that they haven't sort of gone to this positionless, we're just going to have X amount of players is like confusing. I don't really know what the deal is.
Yeah, it's tough because there's still positions to some degree, and it's still sort of part of the way we talk about the game. But we know things have changed drastically to the point where Smart's guarding centers and Jokic is the point guard. And yeah, it's at least from a voting perspective, I think it'd make a lot of sense to get rid of them. And last year was the best example of that with Jokic and Embiid. I mean, they both should have been first team. There's really no reason why they shouldn't have been.
That was bad.
But the other argument, I guess, is that throughout history, like there's been great players who have been second team because they were at the same position, and you would sort of be changing that to some degree if you switched up these rules. So I don't know how they're going to handle that. I think they started to a little bit last year by saying like the most votes you get at a position are going to all count toward your All-NBA, and that's how Embiid ended up being the second team last year. But I don't know. Everyone's going to try to figure it out on their own. I know a lot of voters are saying like we're going to vote Embiid as a forward just to get him in there, but it didn't work.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people try. I saw the votes, but Anyways, circling back around to the Celtics, while we were talking about Grant and Horford, Robert Williams kept coming up. Obviously, he's sort of inching closer to that return date. Christmas was named by, I think, Woj. Talked about Christmas as a possible return date for him. But the point is, the Celtics, who are the best team in the NBA in 18-4, are now getting back their all-defensive second team center, who was a big game changer for them last year. And I know we talked about this on our pregame show yesterday before the first Miami game. I know you've talked about it, and I think you wrote about it too. The defense is going to be great with Rob, right? Like he should improve it on that end. But you talk about a switch on offense where every single player who touches the floor for the Celtics right now can shoot threes, and that's kind of their identity. They just shoot a bunch of threes, and it works because they make a bunch of threes. But Rob can't do that yet, at least maybe in a couple of years if we want to talk about Rob developing a three-point shot, sure. But right now, it's sort of like you're going to have to find a way to integrate him into that offense. Do you think there's going to be any road bumps in doing so?
I think there is, and that might be the one thing that slows this team down right now is that process of reintegrating him. Like they're almost going to have to slow down themselves to make sure that he can be part of what they're doing here. Because, like you said, they don't miss him at all right now, the way this is rolling. Like maybe against Cleveland or whatever, you have some trouble against some of those bigger teams early this year, like Chicago. So you want him to be part of the picture. I think eventually, if he's right, it'll be a fairly seamless fit because I think Joe's big thing is that they can play many different ways. They tried double big early with like Vonleh and Horford, but it didn't work. I think he's willing to go back there if they need to. And obviously you would against a Cavs team or someone like that. But overall, like I think he likes small ball. I think he likes the shooting and spacing and all the pace that they play with. So I think there's a pretty straight path to Rob going to the bench and at least in the immediate future, doing what Kornet's done. And I know that seems like a small role for a guy who was so instrumental last year, but you got to see what sort of shape he's in. Like, where's he at? Does he need to take nights off? Like, I feel like it's going to be a slow buildup for him, even when he does return. So the bench makes a lot of sense for him to be there, dominate the opposing second units. You remember he did that first year. He really started playing in 2020, 2021. So it's going to be tricky. I really hesitate to take White out of the starting lineup. Like I think that was Joe's best move as coach so far is putting him in there. He's still shooting lights out. I think he's 45% now from three. He's really the reason that they're the best offense ever right now. The fact that he's been shooting like this and screening, like I think his screening was such a big deal and probably a big reason that they started him over Grant and some other options there. And it's nice to have that extra ball handler, too, to take pressure off everybody when needed. He's been awesome. It was almost, I said this coming into the year, there was a case that you were going to be better off with White there instead of Rob, just because of the fact that White's a better screener than Rob. And that's another thing Rob's going to have to kind of develop here is better screening. So much of this offense now is screening. You talk about all the shooting that they've implemented now, Jack. There's a lot of things that they do differently now compared to last year. Last year, it was a lot more like straight pick and roll, Tatum and Rob, and that worked for Rob. Now, like it's a lot of off-ball stuff and positioning and spacing, of course, as well. And those aren't really strengths of Rob's game. So I'm interested in what they're going to do with him. To your point, I think there's going to be some bumps along the way trying to reintegrate him. But maybe I'm wrong. I mean, double big last year, you actually look at that lineup. That lineup had a better offensive rating than the White lineup this year by like 3 points. Like that's how dominant they were last year for all the credit this team's getting for its offense. So if he's himself and he's Rob right away, like the Rob we saw at his peak last year, he'll probably be in the starting lineup again pretty quickly.
I think the point you made about the Kornet role is so great because we've seen Luke Kornet flourish in that role. And he's him, right? Yep. Like he's himself, and he's shooting 68% from the field, at least as of before yesterday's game. I'm pretty sure he had a good game again, at least in the minutes he played. Rob's going to be able to fit into that role at the very least. And showing that the team can play with Kornet doing that, and he's not as good as Rob, should encourage you as a fan to believe he's going to be able to fit. It might not happen right away. I think that's a good point too, because they have just been firing threes the whole season. Having a guy out there consistently that isn't doing that is going to be a big change for them. But they should be able to deal with it. If they can play with Luke Kornet, they should be able to play with Rob, even if it has to be in small doses.
It's a great point. Yeah. And Luke's been great. He'll still be an option as an emergency guy if necessary.
He's been fantastic. I mean, just think about like what we expected from Kornet before the season, and he is like not only went like a step up, but like 2 steps up.
I had high expectations. I was one of the few. You remember when he first arrived? Like he did some things. Like, and I remember Brad like raving about him, and you were wondering if it was like just kind of Brad being Brad and
his only like on Twitter is still Luke Kornet.
But like the way he covered the pick and roll, and obviously he can block shots, and he's just massive. There was something there, and they deserve a lot of credit for really refining that in Maine last year and behind the scenes. This is really like, and you know, Hauser's this guy too. Like they haven't had these end of the bench guys who just stun you because of their development, and now they have 2, which is another reason that this team's just such a monster right now. So. Credit to Maine. I thought that Maine group last year was really great. The coaching staff like did a lot of the things that this team's doing now. And I think he was just perfectly positioned to step right in. And you know, these other guys, to go back to that contract situation, they have Kornet signed here for a couple of years for nothing, and Hauser signed for 3 years.
Hauser really makes nothing.
So yeah, those are. We always look at the Heat and are like, why can't the Celtics have these guys? Well, now they do.
Exactly. And I said this before the game yesterday. It really puts into perspective, if you look at the Heat, how like people look at players based on their contracts. Like last year, everyone like Duncan Robinson last year is just a bust, right? He was terrible, blah, blah, blah. Max Strus is shooting worse than him from 3 this year. But he makes minimum, right? Yeah, okay, of course. But he like makes a minimum. And obviously I think Strus can do other things on the court that Robinson can't do because he's more athletic and he's a better defender. But like Strus is shooting worse than Robinson did last year, but since Robinson made 19 million last year, everyone came for him because he shot worse. But Max Strus this year, the tail off, it's, I don't know. It just puts it into perspective. And like you said, even I wrote about Hauser a couple days ago. Like they haven't had a shooter on the roster like Hauser in ever. Like what Eddie House is the name that I think of when I think of the last time they had just like a bench shooter like that. And it's like they had Grant Williams last year. Peyton Pritchard, his rookie year was pretty good in that role. But outside of those two, like you're talking about a guy who can come off the bench and shoot 40% from 3. The Celtics have been searching for that for like so long. Like they tried Shemi Ojala, he didn't work. They tried Aaron Nesmith, he didn't work. Like they brought in all these guys and they finally found it as an undrafted free agent. And they developed him into what Sam Hauser is, which is like, it's game changing when you have that sort of depth and you can identify that sort of thing coming out of the draft. So I think that's been huge for the Celtics. And obviously, I mean, Hauser's been phenomenal.
Phenomenal. Look at that.
There you go. Shout out to the shirt. Circling back quick to Robert Williams, I think it's funny to talk about how, you know, let's stick Robert Williams in the Luke Kornet role, right? Because like just phrasing it that way is funny, but I think it's very true. Like you said, like, he's not going to be the type of guy to spread the floor. He's not going to be Al Horford. He's not going to be able to sit on the 3-point line, set screens, and fade out. I think you have to have him setting screens at the elbow for Tatum and then running the lob on the back cut, stuff like that. Like setting a screen for Smart. Obviously, Robert Williams, Marcus Smart had great chemistry last year. You hope they can reignite that now with Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon to throw him lobs too. The vertical spacing will improve. But I mean, it's tough to imagine there not being challenges with that because of how reliant they are on 3-point shots. And I know that's something Sam complains about because he doesn't love the analytic 3-point ball, but like it's come to the point where the threes they're shooting are getting them out of some tricky situations because the defense hasn't been great or they're turning the ball over. And it doesn't matter because Malcolm Brogdon walks up the floor and nails a 3.
Yeah.
And
yesterday, kind of especially
problem solved. Exactly. So,
well, those quick threes, you know, one of the things Joe's talked about is the fact that like the quick threes are getting the turnovers down because they're not dribbling around a lot. They're taking open shots sooner in the possessions. And that's had a real impact. Before last night, where they kind of had a big turnover night with 16, they were top 5 in turnover percentage. And they were, I think, middle of the league last year. Playoffs was a disaster. I think they were 11th out of the 16 playoff teams in turning the ball over. So that approach has had an impact there. And, you know, I'd never really heard that before, but it makes sense that they're sort of just firing the ball to Smart early in these possessions or Horford and getting those guys those open looks, and they're hitting them at a pretty high rate. Even Smart's like 43% this month. So yeah, I'm with you, Sam. I kind of was skeptical of the approach. You saw some of the totals early this season and some of their up and down results, and you're like, man, are they about to like do this again? Because they kind of did that under Brad, right? They really like to heave. They bought into those analytics. They want to be like the Warriors and Jazz and some of those teams. But now like the execution's at such a high level. and you have so much shooting and those percentages sort of weigh out over, the regular season or even night in, night out. Some guys are going to be hotter, some guys will be colder, and it levels out around that 40% mark where they can just have these big margins. And, it's hard to argue with it anymore. It's working. It's sort of their bread and butter in terms of how they dominate. And other teams really struggle, especially if they're not teams that are super comfortable getting in those 3-point battles, 3-point races. They struggle to keep up. Even at Dallas is pretty similar to them in terms of that rate that they shoot threes at, and they were chasing the whole time. Teams are chasing them. And last night, again, 14-2 to open. That sets a real tone on a game. Like starting the game is so important. And I'm sure the stats out there that say like you go up that much early, you're going to be in a great spot. I think they've gone up by 10 in all but 3 of their games so far. And obviously they only have 4 losses. So those leads are holding. They have a couple games like last night where they just have that lead for the entire second half. They never gave up the lead last night after like the middle of the second. So this approach, like it's impossible to argue with. I don't like it aesthetically, Sam. You're still wondering what's going to happen when it comes down to earth and what their other options are going to be. They're not a great team at the rim outside of the Jays. They do shoot a decent amount of free throws, but they're not really a lead in that category. And their transition game's good, but it's not. They don't use it at like one of the highest rates in the league. So once that shooting comes down to earth a little bit, I'm super interested to see where that goes. And Rob coming back could be one of those things that brings it down just a little bit as they try to work him in. Obviously, he's not a guy who shoots them, but the spacing thing we keep talking about, he sort of just stands out there sometimes, Jack. If he's not involved in a pick and roll or some sort of action, like he can just sort of be standing there in that dunker spot.
Yeah. How crazy would it be if we talk about all this and Rob just comes back hucking threes and he just starts shooting them?
I wouldn't be shocked to see him shoot mid-range because he's done that in the past. He's been decent. He's been decent from like right around the elbows, a little bit farther out.
And that was sort of Baines. That was sort of Baines' process, right? He was shooting a lot of 16-footers, and then he became a 3-point shooter.
He started in the corners. Baines was the man. He had the look. He had the funny looking jump shot when he would shoot a 3, and he made him. He was pretty reliable when he was here, at least.
Yeah. I think he's playing in Australia this year after that obviously terrible
good
injury.
For him.
I gotta keep an eye on what he's doing out there. Hopefully he can make it back to the league.
There was a quick uproar over the summer when people heard out he was working out for teams, and they were like, the Celtics better be in there, and they better take him because they don't have any big men. Yeah. And there was the slight opening for that Baines return. It did not happen.
Celtics fans will take a Shane Larry, like name a player in history, and Celtics fans will take them back.
Anytime.
I'm still begging for Isaiah to sit on the end of the bench. I don't really care if he plays or not. I think he deserves to be there.
Well, I wanted him back during that COVID stretch last year. It was almost a year ago now when everyone was getting signed. They did Joe Johnson, so whatever. But I feel like that was the chance to bring him back and sort of close the book on that because it's still Noah Vonleh's wearing 4 now, and like Isaiah was in town right for that Smart event, but he didn't show up to the game. There's still sort of something cold and
I was at that game. I was expecting him to be there. I was super pumped. I was going with my friends. I'm like, oh man, like Isaiah.
Oh, could you imagine? The place would have went insane.
I know.
Yeah,
it's one of those things.
There's got to be some sort of bad. I don't want to say bad blood, but like you said,
he tweeted about it. He's tweeted about it before, being like, "I've tried everything. They don't want me back." Pretty much. I remember he said that.
He said that in a presser, and I think he tweeted something about like there was sort of an injury situation on the team, and he was like, "Oh, I've heard of that before." Something with Rob, I think. So yeah, there's still something cold with them and him in the organization.
Yeah, well. I feel like you said, Bobby, Vonleh wearing 4, it just might be time to move on and abandon.
Carson Edwards was first.
True. I forgot about that. Edwards.
That's right. Yep.
Moving on. Let's talk briefly about Jayson Tatum because, he is the guy on the Celtics. Jayson Tatum scored 49 points, kind of a cheap 49, really 47 until Bam Adebayo gifted him 2 more at the end of the game against the Heat. Almost got that 50 piece, but there's not really much to complain about when it comes to Tatum this year. He's like, he'll have some rough shooting nights. It is what it is. Like he'll shoot poorly, but then he'll go to the free throw line 20 times, or he'll have a bad shooting night, but he'll play elite defense. And he's been the defensive anchor. I wrote about it. He's playing the free safety role. He's one of the better on ball guys they have. He's guarding John Morant. He's guarding like Donovan Mitchell. He's doing everything for the Celtics. And he's scoring 30 a night. Like, as much as everyone talks about it, it still doesn't feel like Jayson Tatum gets talked about enough because that's how good he's been this season.
Yeah, what's in my mind right now, and I guess I'll ask you guys because I've sort of kicked this around the last couple of days, is he the best player in the league right now? And we don't know it yet. Because I think you still give the benefit of the doubt to the guys who have won championships and done it year in and year out. Because if you asked me last year if he could be number one, I'd say like, all right, is he able to do this at this level and this consistency? Like a Giannis, like a Curry, like Jokic, and some of those other guys in Embiid that were above him a year ago. I had a tough time getting there just because inconsistency was sort of part of his game last year. He'd have those rough shooting nights or those nights where he had to learn to do other things because the scoring wasn't quite there. Now the passing's there every night. The scoring and shooting's there pretty much every night. And defensively, that's what really puts him up there for me because some of those other great players, Giannis aside, obviously, they're not quite at that level defensively. In fact, many of them are a little deficient defensively. So that's a huge feather in his cap. I'm not going to say he's number one. I'll still give the deference to Giannis just because of how much weight he carries and just how dominant he is defensively because he's at another level than Tatum is. He's defensive player of the year caliber. But if we look back a year from now and Tatum's doing this night in and night out, and this is who he is, like he's like Durant or something, which is pretty much what he's been now, you'll look back and say, oh geez, November 2022, he was the best player and we didn't even know it. So I don't like, you sort of want to get ahead and claim it, but I don't know if he's past Giannis yet.
He has got me at a whole new level of confidence. I think since I've really like religiously watched the Celtics, like I was at the very back end of the big three when I was old enough to really like appreciate what was going on, and Jack's the same way. Mm-hmm. This is the most I felt like I can rely on a player to get a team a win. In the past, it was always like the Celtics are going to close this game. They don't have the best closer. The other team is going to be more calm. Tatum has just silenced any of that. He came out in the second half last night when things were kind of up in the air, and he made back-to-back threes multiple times. It wasn't just one time and he iced it. He did it twice. He's crazy. And he can get the free throw line now. That's a huge step up.
That's the big thing.
That is usually the telltale thing when the guy is making the jump to the next level is he's getting free throws. And maybe all the complaining is finally paid off.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit less complaining, which I love. I didn't love that ejection in Montreal and stuff. That kind of set up an start to the league or to the year. But that he hasn't had many issues with those. But I think the key for him has been getting off the ball. And I'm stunned at how much he's screening. If we throw it back a year ago, that's probably when he was just starting to screen for the first time. Now he's doing it all the time. He's in the high post against the zone there. That zone, I wrote about that yesterday. How big of a deal was that 2 years ago? And now it's just like, oh, it's the zone 49. There you go. Like you don't even think about it now. But he's just advanced so much, and so much of it is a willingness to do all these little things that other players, you look at them and you're like, why don't you do these things? And it's pride or it's just comfort or whatever it is. He seems to be willing to do all the little things to keep rising that make you think like, all right, this guy certainly has the chance to be better than Pierce if he wins a title here. But like, you keep seeing his name with Bird more often, and like he's only 24, so he's gonna get to 27 in that prime stretch there. Like you really start to think on this progression that he's on, and this is a great franchise here. He could be the greatest Celtic ever when it's all said and done if he stays on this progression, just because of that willingness, just because of his personality and like how sort of affable he seems to be to improving and playing team basketball and doing all the little things. I've been super impressed by his leadership off the floor too. Obviously, you're kind of keeping track of his quotes night in, night out, Jack. Like a lot of really great ownership over a lot of the things that they need to do and giving different guys on the team credit. Like I've heard him kind of do an extended shout out to Blake and Noah and guys up and down the lineup. They obviously got Smart involved in that Sports Illustrated shoot. So like there's a real ownership over leadership this year from him that I think is important too. And that's sort of where you have the situation where everybody's in the line. I think Brown gets a lot of credit for embracing this number 2 role, even though I think you get that sense from him that he really thinks he can be a number 1 guy. But it's the way that they're going to win is for him to position himself into a number 2 role behind Tatum in terms of how they play. And Tatum, you need your best player to be a great passer. And that was always the challenge for him. I always thought he had potential there, but I didn't know if it was going to be consistent to go back to that again. And now, the assist numbers aren't quite there for him individually, but you see him set a tone with just how easily he gets off the ball and moves it and moves himself without the ball. That really makes this offense deadly. You have to think, Wes, to go back to Dome Theory that I just recorded, my guest said he probably learned some of that from Curry in that final series.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the Celtics offense is operating with him being that off-ball mover and screener, there's a lot of similarities there. And if he's doing his best Curry impersonation at his size and at his skill, it's going to be crazy. It's really something what this has become, because we've seen him grow the whole way, right? And he's gone through these different roles and he's gone through these struggles and ups and downs. And now it's just his team, it's his city, it's his kingdom here, and he's doing a great job overseeing it.
Yeah, and like you said about the quotes and leadership thing, last year it was a lot of, we got to do what we do to get better, and it was this not necessarily like short responses, but it was
There's
like
some deference
the same
to
response.
it. Remember the captain thing
Exactly.
too? They tried to name captains, and he was rolling his eyes. And
I think about that all the time.
And, yeah, it's completely
Sam
different.
wanted Smart.
If they want to give Tatum captain now, I bet he would accept it. But I don't know. They might not want to go back to that.
Yeah, but like you said about the best player in the world, I think Giannis probably still gets that nod. But I had a discussion on Twitter with someone who, like, I tweeted out how Luka was like above Tatum in the rankings after the Mavericks played the Celtics, and I was like, how? Like, Tatum
it's
just dominated.
Impossible. Without the defense, it's impossible. Like, you gotta.
That's what I'm saying.
You gotta play both sides to win it all. I think.
I agree, and Luka Doncic is probably, I mean, I'll take away the probably. I think he's the best offensive player in basketball. Like the way he controls that team, like you take Luka Doncic off that Mavericks team and they're maybe one of the worst teams in the league.
And not
right?
everyone
it's
can
crazy.
play that style. Like
exactly.
It's Harden, LeBron, and him is all we've seen.
Exactly. But then, like you said, like Luka doesn't really play defense, right? They need to cover for him on that end. And they're actually a good defensive team because of the way Jason Kidd has framed things with, they got good defenders. Dwight Powell plays hard. Maxi Kleber is a pretty good defender. You got Reggie Bullock on the wing, Dorian Finney-Smith. Like, they got guys to cover for Luka. But when your superstar's not bringing it on that end, it's like, it's just tougher for him to climb the rankings when people think of best player in the world. And I think over these past few years, you've seen defense get appreciated more, especially with Giannis and the back-to-back MVPs. I mean, Jokic, I guess you take a step back, but he kind of falls under the Luka category of, okay, this guy's just his own offensive fulcrum of doing everything. But I think once people start fully appreciating Tatum and the defense, and I also think it's tougher because the Celtics themselves haven't really been the best defensive team, but like if the Celtics get back to that top 10 defense, Tatum's still doing this and averaging 30 points, I think it'll be really hard for people to look at him and say, okay, he's not top 5. Because I think right now, I don't think there's an argument against him being top 5 in the NBA.
He's top 5 for sure.
He's got to be.
Not to mention the team's top 1.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that helps a lot.
Too.
Yeah. That typically helps a lot in the MVP voting too, which I think is going to be a little crowded. It always is with how many great players there are out there. Like that Curry case is going to be really bulletproof if they turn it around and he's that reason why, although they're in a tough spot. Some other guy, Ryan Barrendone, he talks about this a lot and it really isn't talked about enough. The fact that he goes on and plays every night should be a feather in his cap in that race. Like the totals that he amasses, you're always seeing like, oh, Tatum leads the league in points, like total points, and he's this in total rebounds and blah, blah, blah. Those, you don't see those stats a lot because it's always per game, but those matter because so many guys just don't play. Kawhi, Giannis has nights off here. There, Butler just missed 8 straight games. Like across the league, LeBron, guys are missing all the time. Tatum's never out there. What was that game he took off? The Hornets one? Was that
Wizards.
it? Wizards.
Wizards.
That was so. Wasn't that so weird seeing him on the sideline in the sweatshirt? You just never see that.
Yeah. Very odd, especially against Beal. Like I didn't think he'd miss a game against Beal. There must have had like the ankle was either. Yeah,
games played should be a real big MVP booster, and I think it will be for him.
Not to get cliche, but the best ability is availability, as they say. I think Sam's frozen here. He should be back. There you go. He'll be back.
I thought he fell asleep.
No, and this is what's gonna happen. I'll tell you now. I won't cut this because it happens every time, and it's funny. What's going to happen is he's going to come back and he's going to complain about his Verizon internet and tell us about how no one should ever get Verizon and how that should happen. But
we call it Brockton Wi-Fi on the Garden Report.
That'll do it too. I live right by Brockton. I can't confirm it's Brockton Wi-Fi. That works. But before Sam gets back, I might as well ask you this, but we'll get you out of here when he does. You tweeted about Marcus Smart being an all-star, and we touched on it briefly. Do you think he actually has a case? Like, do you think he could actually sneak in there?
If he keeps rolling at the rate he did in November, and he had a tremendous November, the assists were right up around 8 for the first time really ever with him, and he just seems to keep getting better in that ball handling role. He'll have an outside chance. He shot great in that month too, which helps. His scoring was up. He got off to that really slow start, so it was good to see him turn it around. To even be in the conversation is super impressive. It says a lot about how he's even continuing to get better, almost 8 years into his career now or so, whatever it's been. I don't think it'll happen, but the fact that they're this team that's sort of that juggernaut in the league that's a little bit ahead of everybody, that's usually the case for getting 3 guys. And there's sort of you had the rules. I think you know them better than I do. 6 guards, right? That sort of tightens it up and makes it tricky, because if he was in for a Lopez or something like that, I could see that going his way. But the other guards in the conference, like you mentioned, Halliburton and DeRozan and all these different guys that just have these gaudy stats and that people want to see at the All-Star game, I think it'll be tricky. You remember Horford had the benefit of being the big man when he squeezed in there a couple of times. And that's just an easier field to fit into. So I think, it's worth keeping an eye on now, because I think his stats put him in the conversation. But if I had to predict whether or not he's going to be there, you kind of have to lean no. I think it'll just be Tatum and Brown.
I agree. Welcome back, Sam.
Oh, thank you.
So
lovely work of Verizon.
I told you it was Verizon.
It's so bad. Like, I don't even know. It might be my computer on this one, because it just was saying like there was no internet to be detected. But
now you fell asleep. Your eyes were closed in the
I did. I fell asleep.
Oh, all right. So you get 6 guys, right? Right, Jack. So
Max,
Mitchell.
That's 6 guys if you use both of your reserve slots on guards, right? Because you have 2 guards in the starting lineup, 2 guards on the bench, and then 2 reserve, which can be anything.
Well, here's the tricky thing. So in the first round, I think we can all agree he won't be there. But if Joe's the head coach and guys always bomb out, who's Joe going to coach or pick other than Smart?
Yeah.
So that's a big plus to be in the best team.
But if I had to pick 6 right now, and again, 6 is the max, I think you got to go Halliburton. I think he has earned it. And if the Pacers stay in the play-in mix at the very least, he's been one of the best guards in basketball, I think. I think you go Halliburton, Trae Young, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell are 4 locks. I think they all got to be in there, unless somebody misses time. And then I think Drew Holiday also has to be an all-star, because he's been phenomenal this season with Chris Middleton out. And then at that point, at that point, you're getting DeJounte. Is Jaylen Brown a guard? Do you classify him as that if voters do?
I wouldn't know. Brunson, though, I think is in the mix.
Brunson as well. Kyrie, if he plays enough games, you can't forget about. Like James Harden, if he comes back, although his injury seems like it's going to be a little bit longer. Bradley Beal hasn't been great, but like if we're talking about him versus Smart, maybe you'll lean towards the winning, but it's going to be really tough for Smart to get in, I think. And Tyrese Maxey too, if he carries the load while Harden's out, is going to be in the mix.
Yeah, at least he's hard in the mix though, which is something I don't know if we ever thought he would be. Obviously he's got the defensive player of the year now, so cool to see him start pecking up some accolades.
I said it last summer to Jack. I said Smart would be an all-star.
All right.
You're a year late.
I was way too early.
But
I didn't say he would. I said I could see it. I was like, I don't know. Like, I was like, if he starts really throwing the ball around, getting some assists, you could have a conversation about it. And here we are. He's doing that. And
if they're like a 40+ win team by the break, like they're that ridiculously good, like Bobby, like you said, like teams like that usually get 3 guys, and if there is a 3rd guy, it's probably going to be Smart on that team. So
and winning does help. You hear that every year that the best teams are going to get more guys, so they'll be in that position. Joe should be coach if they're going to keep this 1 seed pace going, and that should benefit them as well if some guys are injured and dropping out, which there always will be. But this team, man, I mean, listening to Lowe and Scal the other day, I think they said it like, if we're going back to March at this point now, it's 40. I think they said then it was 45-11 over the last 56 games, and with a win yesterday, that would be 46-11. So
yeah,
they're on that level. Like, I don't know, we're gonna sit here in a couple of months when we're talking and just say that like they're the new Warriors. It's possible. Like, it's just I can't fathom what they're doing right now. It's unbelievable. Even yesterday, Butler's out. You're on this win streak. They're hitting you hard with that comeback early. You think this might be the night you finally slip up and let one go, and they score 130 again and take it easily. Like, I'm expecting them to take Fridays again now, even with Butler back. It's just no teams. We're all just waiting for Christmas when that Bucks Celtics matchup comes, because it feels like that's the only team on their level.
That's what I was saying. I'm getting frustrated when they don't blow teams out now. Like, that's how much confidence I have in the Celtics, where they just feel like they are a step above everybody else. You're right. Christmas is the day.
Should be interesting though, right? Because they've had a little bit of a softer stretch here. Now on Sunday you get Brooklyn, who at least has the firepower to hang with you. Golden State's coming up, which is going to be really fun. The Lakers and Clippers, just some different teams than ones you've seen so far. So I'm really excited for that. I'm actually going out to San Fran and LA for those 3 games. So that's going to be really exciting. Like, those are some fun games. And then you have Phoenix and whoever else is mixed in there too. Toronto, I think, plays you pretty good. So this next 6-7 games here, including Butler's return on Friday, are going to be big tests.
Yeah, I'm excited. I know Sam's not. He'd rather the Hornets game. I think it'll be fun to watch.
Stay up late.
Sam's ready for that Magic. Anyway. Sam's ready for that Magic miniseries.
I would love a playoff series against the Magic, actually.
Imagine.
I'm Captain Miserable in the playoffs.
I'm interested, but before we wrap here, you guys in that, man, they let bowl camp. Like, do you think they really screwed up there?
I don't think there was any, like, it's not like he was suiting up for you and like
the
he gave
thing.
you any sample size.
He wasn't gonna get a chance. I don't think. Like, the Sturs thing you could be more mad at, but
I'm big time out on being like they didn't like give this guy the right chance. I think there's a lot of situational opportunity. Like you say, Jack, he wasn't playing here. He wasn't.
And
this team went to the finals.
He starts in Orlando.
Yeah, and he's good. I mean, you got to give him credit.
Orlando's the place where you find that kind of thing. Like, somebody finds that they have their feet under them that they didn't know before.
Which is why it's so impressive for the Celtics to find guys like Hauser, because they have to find them in their limited roles, and Hauser's kind of earned.
Well, even then, if Gallinari doesn't get hurt, you don't know how much Hauser's playing.
Very true. Also very true. And
I guess that's to that point, Pritchard too, who we didn't mention here in the show. Like, on top of everything else, him sneaking in for those 4 or 5 games there and being as good as you possibly could have expected was awesome too. Huge. And it's been a lot of talk about trade him, keep him. They'll have an extension question with him next summer. It's good having him around and ready for if Brogdon gets hurt, if Smart's hurt. Smart's dealing with so many injuries right now. I don't know what's going on there, but he's got that right ankle still. The oblique just never seems to go away. So you need Pritchard in there, I think, for depth purposes.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys. Like, if you talk about Grant being a potential, fatality of contract extensions and too much money, like Pritchard, you got to imagine is even lower on that totem pole. So it's tough for him, and I guess you'll just kind of have to see what happens. But
it's sad. He's legitimately good. He's like serviceable. If he's on like any other team, he's playing.
I agree.
I think Bill Simmons said he'd play like 30 minutes on the Lakers.
He would.
He'd be perfect for them because he can shoot.
I agree. They've got their own problems going on. But before we let you go here, the last thing I promise is, how much do you care or not care about the Prince and Princess being at the Celtics game against the Heat?
Were you there, Jack? I don't know.
I wasn't. I'll be there tomorrow, but I wasn't there. Trevor was there for CelticsBlog against the Heat yesterday.
I was so confused because there was a lot of reporters there, and I guess they came over from Britain. I didn't really understand what the Prince of Wales was. Like, I thought it was actually like Wales, but it's what, William and Kate or whoever. I know of them. I'm not into that stuff. I'm Irish. No. There's a whole thing there. But I think Americans in general, it just sort of stuns me that there's that captivation with them.
It's so weird.
I don't get it.
And I
like England, and I don't get it.
It's almost the opposite. Again, we were talking to Adam Taylor in the Slack Jack, and he's like, "Oh yeah, a lot of England, they're not into it." But here in America, where you think it'd be the opposite, there's sort of more fascination, and like you get the TV shows and everything, and they don't. I'm not even gonna go to the Queen.
Did you see the picture the mayor put out of all of them in the front row, and Wick could not care less? Like, Wick is watching the game, and then they're all taking a selfie, and Wick is in the back, but he's just like focused on the game. He's not paying attention to what's going on with the family.
And I know people tweeted that. I didn't really notice it in real time. I thought it was weird that they showed them on the Jumbotron, and then they cut it off quick, but there were boos raining down when they put them on.
Well, you were there, Jack. You were home yesterday because you weren't at the game, but on the broadcast, they were on the screen as much as the Celtics.
Oh, it was on.
They
Yeah,
kept cutting to them. This is the
There
greatest. Look at this. Look at Wick. He doesn't care.
No, I will say Wick was very excited to have that stage and the photo op and everything. That was just, I think, a bad photo of him. But I don't know. I don't know much about them. I guess they're doing a lot of climate change work or whatever, and that's sort of what they're here for. But again, it's
I guess they
not for
flew
me.
commercial because they thought it'd be hypocritical to take a first class flight or a
Wick
private
over
jet.
there. Look at him over there.
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you, he was thrilled. But again, it was really funny that Joe had that line about Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and Brown was rolling his eye. I don't know what people would they think the players are going to be doing backflips over there. They're more excited to see.
Tatum was.
Was he?
Was he?
Oh,
I don't know. He was shaking their hand, and he was all over it, man. I mean, he probably had to be. Yeah, they probably went up to him and were like, "You have to do this."
Yeah.
Derek.
That does seem like more of a Tatum thing than a Brown thing, though. It was funny that they asked Brown because, knowing Brown and his whole thing, like those are not the people he's excited to meet.
No. And yet Derek White, he was like, they were like, he had to get shuffled out of the way because they were coming through the players' town. And he goes, "Yeah, I was confused. I didn't know what the hell was going on."
Well, the media was. I guess certain people in the media that were there were like treating it like it was going to be this really like exciting thing for the players and. Like all of us know it's not. Like
yeah, like they're our age.
Yeah.
Like they don't care.
Again, they're more excited to see Bia and Ozuna and whoever else has been showing up to these games recently. I got to meet Westside Gun there the other day. Like that's more exciting for these guys than the Prince of England.
I'm like the biggest hater ever. Like I don't hate them. I just like don't care so much. I just
that's
don't
where
get
I'm at. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. I don't get it. But anyways, we've gone over your 45 minutes that we mentioned, so I apologize for that. But thank you, Bobby, for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. You want to it's on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, which you should be at Real Bob Manning. But you want to let everybody else know where they can find all your stuff?
Yep, we're at CelticsBlog, both of us, of course. CLNS Media is where I'm writing night in and night out about the team. We're pretty much there every night covering, and of course, like I said, we'll be on the West Coast trip there too. And every Saturday at Boston Sports Journal, and of course, check out the new Dome Theory podcast over on CLNS Media on YouTube, and we are live on the post game show every night on YouTube, so that's there as well.
Yes, sir. If you're listening to us, Bobby. Go check out all that stuff.
We always talk about you when you're not here. We always like, oh, friend of the show, Bobby. We have this.
Well, it's always fun being on, guys. Anytime.
Appreciate it. Thank you. But thank you all for listening, and I'll let Sam wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening or watching. If you're on YouTube, you're on Guy Boston or the How About Them Celtics pod. You should be on the second one. Jack will push it as much as he can. But make sure you subscribe there and leave a like, leave a comment, talk to us. We're climbing up the ranks of the subscribers, almost at 150. Pretty good. If you're on the streaming services, follow us, leave a nice review, say some nice things, or don't. But again, follow Bobby at Real Bob Manning on Twitter. He's great to us. He's a great friend, always willing to hop on the show with us. Check him out on CLNS at CelticsBlog, Boston Sports Journal. Jack at Jack Simone NBA. He's doing all kinds of stuff. Hard work over there from Jack. He's tweeting during the game. Spoiled Mondays for me a bit. Don't worry about it. And you can follow me at Sam LaFrance NBA. I'm putting stuff out on Houdini. All right, we're back. That's our show for today. Bye.
Tic-tac-toe.